Since 2014, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has been waging a brutal and bloody war on Yemen, which according to UN estimates has directly killed 150,000 people in Yemen, with hundreds of thousands more dead due to famine and lack of healthcare facilities caused by the war. The U.S.'s response to that war was to get involved on the side of the Saudis. In 2015, President Obama announced support for Saudi Arabia's deadly strikes and began providing a full array of military support, including weapons, intelligence, crucial in-air refueling, surveillance tech to support ongoing bombing of Yemenis. Since then, the U.S. has provided unceasing support despite a humanitarian outcry both within the U.S. and around the world. And while a UN-brokered truce in April put a pause on Saudi strikes, that truce expired 2 months ago, and many fear a return to more bombing and more bloodshed. Within the U.S., opposition to that war and Americans' involvement in it had come from largely anti-war activists and the left, but recently there has been increasing support from it on the right as well. Right-wing groups like Americans for Prosperity and Freedom Work have begun urging support for a resolution by Senator Bernie Sanders to withdraw authorization from the Biden administration to continue to be involved in this war. And it's not hard to see why the right is now starting to as well. If you listen to what Donald Trump described as American first foreign policy principles in 2016, it was the idea that we should not be involved in wars unless our national security was directly at stake. And it's very hard to make that case when it comes to sending billions of dollars to the Saudis to bomb Yemen, even though it's part of their proxy war with Iran in Yemen. So now what we have is not only people on the left, but largely people on the right, including numerous Republican right-wing senators like Rand Paul and Mike Lee, stepping up and saying they were ready to support Bernie Sanders' authorization to withdraw support and authorization for the Biden administration to continue to involve himself in this war. And it looked as though there was going to be a vote this week where Bernie Sanders' resolution to withdraw this authorization could actually pass, in large part because the American right was now joining with the left to say there's no reason we should be involved in this war. And yet, for some reason, at the very last minute, Bernie Sanders decided, painfully and with deep regret, to withdraw his own resolution that was about to pass simply because Joe Biden told him to. Here's what Bernie Sanders said when he announced on Twitter what it was that he was doing. He said, quote, we're going to have this tweet in just a second. He said, quote, today I withdraw from consideration by the U.S. Senate my war powers resolution after the Biden administration agreed to continue working with my office on ending the war in Yemen. But don't be too disappointed because Bernie then pledged to hold the Biden administration's feet to the fire, adding, quote, let me be clear, if we do not reach agreement, I will, along with my colleagues, bring this resolution back for a vote in the near future and do everything possible to end this horrific conflict. But it's so obvious that what Bernie said is a fraud. And that was quickly pointed out by an actually principled anti-war right-wing libertarian, Justin Amash, who had been a member of the Republican Party and became an independent, who explained in response to Sanders what was really going on and how cynical Bernie Sanders' claims was. Justin Amash, Amash wrote, quote, at which time, under GOP control will block your efforts, but you know that already, as does the Biden administration, which is why they don't want you to pass this joint resolution now when all the pressure is on the president because his party currently controls. In other words, the only chance that Bernie actually has to get this resolution passed is right now in the lame duck before the Republicans take over the House. The Biden administration knows that, Bernie knows that, and that's why he withdrew it, because Joe Biden told him to, knowing that this is the only chance it could actually pass. And instead of just admitting that, Sanders essentially defrauded his own followers by saying, I'm going to hold them accountable. If they don't really get this done, I'm going to bring this back, knowing it never has a chance to pass again. And this is always what Bernie Sanders does, and the American left, such that it exists, does, is they pretend antagonism with the Democratic Party, all while, in fact, being constantly subservient to the Democratic Party and doing what they're told. To help me analyze this further, I'm going to be speaking right now to someone who's actually a man of the left, but who, unlike Bernie Sanders and the squad, is guided by his principles, not subservience to any party. He's someone who's become one of the most honest and incisive critics of the left wing of the Democratic Party, such as it is, the writer and analyst Nick Cruse of the Black Revolutionary Network. Nick, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You helped us get our show ready in the pre-launch episodes, but we're thrilled to have you on the real show itself.
Yeah, it's great, man. This is a great show, Glenn, so I appreciate you having me back on.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. You've become one of my favorite critics and writers when it comes to understanding what's really going on the left wing of the Democratic Party. So let me just begin by asking, you heard that description that I just gave. I know you've been following it closely and writing about it yourself. What do you make of what just happened here?
I want you guys to understand that this is probably Joe Biden's biggest campaign failure. He promised that he would end the genocide in Yemen, but he actually did the exact opposite. He provided cover for the Saudi-led coalition. Biden said that he was going to create and make the Saudi Arabia government a pariah, but he provided cover for them killing journalists. And when they had the original ceasefire in the beginning of the spring, you had a Saudi-led coalition that broke that by maintaining the blockade, which is the main cause of death of Yemeni people. 70% of the people who died in Yemen are children. The bombings are disgusting and they're a horrific act, but they actually represent a very small amount of the deaths in Yemen. Most of the deaths in Yemen is because of the blockade. And that is the blockade that Joe Biden and the U.S. and the Saudi-led coalition continue to push, despite Biden saying he was going to end that. Now, I want you guys to understand why what Bernie did is extremely nefarious, because he, in 2019, proposed the same thing when Donald Trump was president, and then Donald Trump vetoed it. So I am asking this question, Glenn, why did it take Bernie Sanders 2 years after Joe Biden took office to even float the idea of putting this back out there and backing out when Joe Biden said that he will work to end the war? And if you read the press release that came from the Biden administration, one of the reasons why they said they can't do this right now is because it may, quote unquote, complicate the conflict in Ukraine and Russia, if you could believe that. It's beyond insane. And we can't miss words here. This is evil. This is top tier evil, because as the Democratic Party and the liberal establishment pretend to care about the Ukrainian people, you have Biden that is sponsoring multiple genocides, the one in Yemen and the one in Israel and Saudi Arabia. And we can't even get the progressive, quote unquote, left to call this out. In fact, they provide cover for the war in Ukraine. Bernie, by doing this and pretending that Joe Biden is a good faith actor, is providing cover for Joe Biden. So I cannot emphasize enough how much of this betrayal this is, but this is why I told people to leave the Democratic Party. Even the people who are considered the left flank of the Democratic Party, in order to be a part of that club, you can't speak out against the military-industrial complex. And you see that in mass with them falling in line with the Ukraine war, and you see this with the cowardly act of Bernie Sanders. Don't get twisted. This is meant to provide cover for the Biden administration. For the last few weeks before the midterms, a lot of people thought the Republican Party was going to have a red wave, take over Congress, dominate the Senate. Now the Democratic Party in the midterms did much better than expected. So Bernie put this out, and Biden and the Democrats, not having the excuse of the Republicans blocking this in Congress, demand Bernie to not propose it. And like a good little boy, Bernie Sanders followed that act. So and Nick, he said, the reason why we pulled...
Exactly. But let me ask you just a couple about a couple of those dynamics that I find so interesting. So first of all... Thanks for watching this clip from System Update. Catch our full shows for free, live weekdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on Rumble, and join our locals community at greenwald.locals.com for all of my written journalism, exclusive after-show Q&As, and more.